Hello everyone, we are back with another round of the Pokemon International Championships in Europe. We have Pedro Petruzzi, I think is what it is, on the left versus Pablo Mesa on the right. The last time I saw Pablo on stream, he attached 3 different colored energy and a second fighting energy to his Rayquaza and blatantly cheated by trying to do the additional damage for each fighting energy, even though it's based on the amount of colors attached to your Rayquaza. And then they almost immediately asked him back to be a stream commentator because Pokemon loves cheaters. So hopefully we won't see any shady business from him this time. We are seeing him go first. He is playing Mew VMAX. We are seeing the Battle VIP Pass opening, which is always what you like to see as a Mew deck. We also are playing against a Gardevoir EX deck, so Pablo should actually be quite favored here. Mew has a pretty good matchup against Gardevoir, in my opinion. They can always put down Lost City and then Lost Zone your Gardevoir lines after they're knocked out, and then what are you going to do? It also just races you way too fast, and the minus damage from double turbo doesn't end up mattering too much, especially since you can just knock out a Mimikyu EX without having to do a power tablet or a Zacian with only one power tablet or a choice belt. Meanwhile, they have to get a ton of energy onto one of their Zacians or whoever to just take a knockout on the V-Star. But if they can get the Sky Seal Stone turn off and take 4 prize cards off of one Mew VMAX, then it's a lot easier, because then they can just knock out a basic Mew V or the Genesect V in order to swing that matchup back into their own favor, so they don't have to, load up a giant Zacian a second time. Yeah. Also, if you're Mew, you can always Psychic Leap to knock out a Zacian too if they just load a ton of energy onto it. So as we can see, Pablo Ultra Balls gets more Pokemon. He used one Genesect now. You could tell because he did tap that to the side. He is using a second Genesect. Genesect's ability, Fusion Strike System, does allow you to draw cards until you have the same number of cards in hand as Fusion Strike Pokemon in play. The Mew deck generally only plays Fusion Strike Pokemon, so it's not too bad of an option. I personally have been having a lot of consistency issues with Mew for some reason, even though you would think it's the most consistent deck ever, because it just discards cards and draws more cards. But with the loss of Quick Ball, having to play things such as Nest Ball instead, if you have a full bench already and you draw a Nest Ball, you can't even play it to thin it out of your hand, because you would be playing it to a guaranteed no effect because you have no free bench spots, so you're not even allowed to play the card. So you do have to play like quad Lost Vacuum, and then you're Lost Zoning your own stuff, so then like Silene isn't even a card that you even really feel like wanting to play in the deck most of the time because you're Lost Zoning your own cards. It's not the same deck anymore, it doesn't feel like. I've personally been having a lot more fun with the full Fusion Strike build with the Fusion Strike energies. I feel like it has a lot better of a matchup against things like Lugia that way. But you could always throw back the 1/1 Aerodactyl line if you still want to play the quad double turbo energy build of the Mew. A lot of people still are favoring the quad double turbo, even though I don't. You can always play that Deoxys as well. Looks like we're playing Defiance Belt, or Band, or whatever it is, in this deck. I was testing that out in this deck for a little bit of time, but then one of my friends says, what's the difference between playing that and Choice Belt, the Miraidon matchup? And I said, you're right, and then I took it out and put Choice Belt back in. Although I play neither of them now. I went back for the Sky Seal Stone, because I feel like the matchups that you're less favored in become more favored with the Sky Seal Stone. And all of the matchups where Choice Belt would be better, you can just attach another energy and be fine. So, I'm going to be trying to say this more often in the early parts of the video now, but as always, guys, do not forget to comment, like, and subscribe and all that, because that is important for the YouTube algorithm. That subscribe button is down below. If you are enjoying the videos that have been coming out from me. Make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss those videos. You can even hit that notification bell if you want to be directly notified when videos go live, but I generally post every day at midnight right now, so you shouldn't have to worry about being reminded when a video goes live. We are seeing a full bench from a couple Battle VIP passes here from Gardevoir. That is exactly what you want to be seeing. We do have a Manaphy here. We're going to retreat into that because that is our least valuable Pokemon in the deck in this matchup. The Manaphy does not do anything besides prevent bench damage, and Mew does not do bench damage. At best, they can play Oricorio and use the attack of the Oricorio to put 5 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon, and that bypasses Manaphy because you're not doing damage, you're doing damage counters. It's a different mechanic, technically. So, the Gardevoir deck needs to get as many Ralts into play as possible to evolve them into as many Curly as possible, because the Curlies do have a refinement ability, much like the Zoroark GX that we've had before that is a fan favorite for a lot of people. It lets you discard a card to draw 2 cards. Unfortunately, Curlia is not an attacker like the Zoroark was, so you... Pablo shuffling 2 boss's orders after using 1. Back in with the Pal Pad. Definitely knows what he's doing to pick off those Ralts as fast as possible. But as I was saying, those Curlias are not really good attackers like the Zoroark GX was. But the Gardevoirs, the EX and the Shining Arcata 1-prizer are both very good attackers. The Gardevoir EX just does a straight 190 and heals itself of all special conditions. The special condition thing doesn't generally come into play. The only important ones you would really want to heal most of the time would be like sleep and paralysis, but both of those prevent you from even being able to attack in the first place, so attacking doesn't heal them. But a straight 190 is pretty good. It does one-shot quite a bunch of things, especially if you are playing something like the Defiance Belt. That does help you get those one-shots on fresh Zacians and things like that. So that is a reason to play something like the Defiance Belt. The regular Shining Arcana does 60 plus 30 for every psychic energy on it, as well as the Zacian V has the same attack, but it's just a basic Pokemon. It's also a basic V, so you can use the Sky Seal Stone on it to take, say, 4 prize cards off of Mew VMAX. And Pablo has still just been playing Mew the way Mew has been played for over a year since the release of the Fusion Strike set when we saw Mew first released. So, don't really have to go into too much depth explaining that. He played some Cram-O-Matics, where you discard item cards to flip a coin and if heads, search your deck for cards. Just uses Fusion Strike systems to draw more cards. He has 4 Seal Stone on 2 of his different Genesect Vs on the bench. The 4 Seal Stones do give those V-Star powers that can be used even under Path to the Peak to be able to search his deck for any 1 card, giving him essentially half a Starbirth. And we just go into Pedro's turn after that first Ralts goes down. So, not looking too good for Pedro here. That boss's orders really messed with his plans because now he has a dead Mew, a dead Manaphy on his bench that he can't really do anything with. And the fact that he has Radiant Greninja and the Mew already in play makes it really clogged so that he can't get enough Ralts. If Pablo was also playing something along the lines of the Lost City, you would love to see that because that would really that would get these Pokemon out of play permanently. The Miriam is usually played in the Gardevoir decks like this because you can shuffle up to 5 Pokemon from your discard pile into your deck and draw 3. So that gives you a lot of value recycling your Gardevoir lines, especially if these Ralts go down early. But that's not an option if those cards are in the Lost Zone instead. But these Mews have generally been taking the Lost Cities out of their own deck to put in more paths. So it's not likely that's going to be something that Pedro is going to have to worry about. We did get to see one Level Ball go for a Curlia using Refinement and then using an Ultra Ball to get a second Curlia. We are now going to use Mew to look at the top 6 for an item card, find a level ball as well. So we could use that level ball to try to find a Ralts that's in deck. However, it looks like Pedro is probably aware of what's left in deck already. He has one Ralts that just went down, and if he prized one Ralts, then there's none in deck, so you might as well just refinement away the level ball that you can't even get any use out of right now. You could also like decide to level ball to get a Kirlia and then refinement that away, since you're going to be playing with just these 2 Kirlia lines, but you'd rather just not have to rely as much on the Miriam as much as you can, especially if you also play Clara or the Rescue Carrier. You could use those to get Ralts right back into your hand and re-bench it. And if you were to discard the Kirlia too early like that, then you won't get use out of cards like that. So it looks like Pablo is going to use his Forest Seal Stone Star Alchemy power to search his deck for any one card. Looks like he's eyeing up the Switch cart because that will allow him to retreat his Mew VMAX into the Mew V or the Genesect, and then Switch cart switches his active basic Pokemon with one of his bench Pokemon and then heals 30 damage from that Pokemon that used to be in the active spot. So that will reset the effect on the Mew VMAX. When it copies the Genesect V's Techno Blast attack, it says that it cannot attack during the next turn. So you can always reset effects like that by putting something to the bench and then bringing it back up. So here we go. We are going to use the boss's orders we already shuffled back in and already refound to bring up the Kirlia. Now we are going to use the Switch cart to switch back into the Mew VMAX and use Technoblast yet again to knock out another Kirlia, leaving Pedro with only one Kirlia in play. And as I always say with the chess analogy, putting Pedro in check because he only has one Gardevoir line in play. Oh, and it looks like he's actually going to go for the Psychic Leap. He does play the Power Tablet. He can copy Psychic Leap. You do not have to shuffle your attacker back into the deck with Psychic Leap. You can choose whether you want to or not. So just uses that so that he does not have to switch his Pokemon out again on the next turn. So yeah, Pablo honestly playing this pretty flawlessly. Also puts Path to the Peak in play, holding it for the turn that a Kirlia can turn into a Gardevoir EX, just so that there is the least likelihood that the Gardevoir EX's ability comes into play, because Path to the Peak was written in such a way that it sort of erratas itself almost. It future-proofed itself is the better terminology here. How it shuts off the abilities of Rule Box Pokemon. Well, if Pokemon creates a new type of card that has a Rule Box, it still shuts that off as well. However, they did decide to bring back the original Fire Red, Leaf Green, Ruby Sapphire type era EX Pokemon. We had EX Pokemon back in the Black and White era and the X and Y era, but they were actually capital E, capital X, fun fact. And these ones are actually a retrain of the ones from back in the Generation 3 days. So they actually are not the same. Those two types of EXs are not the same. These are the same as the Gen 3 ones, not the Black and White Gen 5, 6 ones. So we are going to use the Mew here. We get an Ultra Ball. I'm not really sure what you do if you're Pedro here. It looks like he is playing the Mewtwo V-Union in this build. The Mewtwo V-Union is not the most popular version of this deck going forward. During this tournament, it was a more popular version of it until we saw Tord and Robin's version that we saw in a couple previous rounds. It just seems to be a little bit more consistent without the Mewtwo V-Union, and the Mewtwo V-Union does not do enough to certain types of Lost Box decks, especially Nick Moffat's deck, who plays the Moltres that can attach Darkness Energy to itself when it benches itself, because then it does like extra damage based on the amount of prize cards your opponent took, and you just get a really easy 3 prize card knockout if you attack with quite literally anything dark type. It's pretty bad against Lugia as well, because they also have the Tyranitar V. It's just unfortunately not too good. but it is a fun card to play nonetheless, because, you know, assembling Exodia in your discard pile is pretty fun. So we were able to replace the Path to the Peak with Temple of Sinnoh, which not only makes it so the ability of Gardevoir EX does come into play this turn, but also that the Mew's double turbo energies are now only single colorless. But Pablo's only played one so far, so even if he doesn't end up finding another Path to the Peak, he can, to replace, or Lost Vacuum even, to get rid of that stadium, he can just attach another double turbo and just feel fine. We are using Gardevoir EX's ability here now. We put one energy from the discard pile onto ourselves and one onto the Mew, putting 20 damage onto each Pokemon that way. And it looks like we are just going to pass with the with the Manaphy in the active spot again. We did Clara back a Ralts so that we can potentially rare candy it into maybe a Shining Arcana Gardevoir on this next turn to use as an attacker. So just trying to buy a turn here, but it looks like Pablo does go in with the escape rope, so now Pedro is going to have to try to sacrifice something. Looks like he's going to choose the Radiant Greninja. He feels maybe that's the Pokemon with the least amount of use. The Mew can still get more item cards, could potentially find a rare candy if we're still missing that. Although, you usually don't play rare candy in the Mewtwo V Union build. So Pablo does have the Path to the Peak, so he will be able to put his double turbo energy back online, essentially, and even goes for a Judge. Pedro does stack up a lot of cards in his hand with things like Refinement and the like, so the Judge is pretty good there, making sure that since there are no more Kirlias in play, because one did evolve into the Gardevoir, and there are no Shining Arcana Gardevoirs either, there are no ways for Pedro to use his Pokemon to draw cards, so he's going to have to draw a good supporter off of this. I think he drew Roxanne, which if Pablo takes a knockout, and that is indeed Roxanne in Pedro's hand, that's actually the perfect supporter to have drawn this turn. Looks like Pablo has a Roxanne in his prize cards. Also, you can see Pablo is playing Avery as well, which is in his prize cards. If Gardevoir gets that hot turn 1 like it did in this game, and Pablo isn't able to get boss's orders, the Avery is just as good, because it can force the Gardevoir player to discard 2 of their bench Pokemon, which could be their... could force them to get rid of like their Mew or their Radiant Greninja in order to keep their Ralts in play. Because they need to keep their Ralts in play. Looks like we failed a Mysterious Tail from the Mew, not able to find any item cards off the top 6 of our deck. And we are going to go and bring the Kirlia back here, re-evolving into that. That's the other thing we got off that Clara earlier. So we are going to use Refinement to get rid of another Psychic Energy to draw 2. I'm wondering if we've gotten all the Mewtwo pieces in our discard pile yet, so we can assemble Exodia and Obliterate. However, it does not really quite obliterate in this matchup. I think Pablo's only down 1 Power Tablet, unless I missed one earlier off of maybe a Cram-O-Matic or just burning one. But he's definitely only played 1 for extra damage. And the thing is whenever Pedro gets rid of the Path to the Peak so that he can use his own ability, he is still allowing Pablo to get back his own abilities. So Pablo is able to just draw tons of cards yet again. Looks like we are going to Serena one of these benched Genesect up. I believe those do have Psychic Resistance though, right? Or am I wrong? I'm gonna have to look that up. I'm curious. Genesect V. No, it has Grass Resistance. I was wrong. So never mind, that's an exact one shot. So as I said, Gardevoir EX can be a good attacker. It has 4 damage counters because it's had to use its own ability on itself twice, putting 2 damage counters each time. So we start at 310. So we are at 270 right now. So can Mew one-shot a 270 HP Pokemon? That would be the route Pablo definitely wants to take this turn if he has the option available to him. So we'll have to see if he has enough power tablets left to be able to do that. This card's Fan of Waves with the Ultra Ball. That's really only good against things like Arceus and sometimes Lugia. But not too great in this matchup. Let's see, we got a Judge and a Boss off of this. I can't tell what other item cards are in his hand. He has Echoing Horn. If there was something like a Zacian V in the discard pile for Pedro, Pablo could always bring that back, boss it, and knock it out, which would be a fun play. Looks like he is going to Feather Ball. And you could Echoing Horn something that Pedro doesn't want in play, I suppose, but I think the thing that you would mind the least being back in play is the Radiant Greninja, but yeah, it looks like we're gonna Escape Rope, which will force up the Manaphy. Echoing Horn what? What are you Echoing Horn here? Yeah, the Radiant Greninja is the best option. So he is going to do that just to thin it out of his hand. A little unfortunate that he has to do that, but that's the way it has to go. We do get a power tablet here. I know we have that boss's orders, but you can see the way that Mew's hand gets clogged up a lot more easily now. His bench is full, but he has a Nest Ball in hand. You can't burn that. The Path to the Peak has to be played. It looks like we're going to go for a Judge instead of that boss. So, yeah, would have loved to see enough power tablets to be able to go in with the attack on the Gardevoir. But you still feel fine just attacking a 1-prizer, taking the knockout, going down to 2 prize cards remaining, and then the only attacker Pedro still has in play is the Gardevoir EX. Plus, you pathed it, so it has no ability. Pedro is also already down at least 1 Stadium card, so these Gardevoir decks usually only play 2 and no Lost Vacuum. So there's a lot less likelihood of potential that this Gardevoir will be able to use its ability at all for the rest of the game. Unless Pablo wants to get rid of his own Path to the Peak, which if he can avoid it, he will. Yeah, it would have been better to save that Echoing Horn for this turn, because the Manaphy is in the discard pile. You could bring that back, because that's just a dead card to be on the bench. But again, nothing Pablo did wrong. It's just the way he drew his cards was just a little unfortunate for him. So Pedro's eyeing up his own boss's orders here. We see that cool full art Lysander one. But who would he bring up? I guess another Genesect to knock that out with the Gardevoir. And just make it so maybe Pablo doesn't have the ability to... Yeah, maybe make it so Pablo doesn't have the ability to one-shot this Gardevoir. Because Pablo has been avoiding it. There are 2 prize cards remaining, so if Pablo just like hits into this thing, he's not really getting too good of value off of it. And then Pedro can just boss his orders one more time for the win. He does have a Curlia in play. This is a lot closer than I would have intended it to go, especially with the, like, how well the early game went for Pablo. But that is the weakness of decks that play a lot of bench sitter Pokemons like this. Sometimes during the Mega Rayquaza EX format, after the release of Roaring Skies, you would just see games be won because you Lysandered up 3 Shaman EX in a row and knocked them all out. and never even had to worry about the Mega Rayquaza at all. I've certainly won and lost plenty of games that way. The Eternatus as well would always put a lot of Crobat Vs into play. So again, you could just boss his orders 3 turns in a row, knock those out, and never even have to worry about going through the Eternatus. And much is the same with Mew VMAX here. You have all of these Genesects sitting on your bench to draw you cards every single turn, but they have only 190 HP. They are themselves a liability at times. And that 190 from the Gardevoir EX is perfect math here. And Pedro managed to make it so there's only 40 damage on this Gardevoir EX. If there was any more than that, it would make it that much easier for Pablo to be able to take a one-shot. And looks like Pablo does go for a Cram-O-Matic and fail it. So Pablo is really digging for power tablets. I know he's used at least one. There is one in his hand now. I think he's going to go for the play this turn. I think there's an Ultra Ball in his hand and a Roxanne. So he could, it looks like he's going for the Roxanne to play it, to hopefully draw into the power tablet. And if he misses, he does put the Path to the Peak in play. It's a little, like, it feels a little off putting the Path to the Peak in play before you've used, or no, he has used all his Genesects because he only has 2 in play. For some reason, I was thinking he still had a third one, but nope, there's been 2 knocked out back-to-back turns, so he only has 2 left. And he gets another power tablet here. So that is 9. So that is 1 more he can use. He still needs 1 more power tablet. He needs all 3 power tablets this turn because the Choice Belt does not give him any additional damage here. Even if he was playing something like Defiance Belt instead, he would not be able to get there. So he does not draw like a Lost Vacuum here. If he drew a Lost Vacuum, well, no, he still doesn't have any. I keep forgetting he doesn't have any more Genesects in play. But had he had 1 more Genesect to be able to use, and he had the Lost Vacuum to get rid of his own path, then he could draw like the rest of his deck, find his last power tablet, and win the game. Unless that's still prized. I remembered the Avery and the Roxanne were in his prize cards, and he took the Roxanne. But I can't remember what his last prize card was, so maybe that was power tablet. We do see the rescue carrier here is going to get back Ralts Curlia. We are going to Palpat as well. We're going to put our own Boss's Orders and Serena back into the deck so that we have the most amount of outs in the deck to bring up that Genesect and win the game here. So can Pedro do it? If Pedro can do it here, he wins. He's also going to Sky Seal Stone just to thin it out of his own hand. And Roxanne. Yeah, so he has Roxanne and 1 Curlia and the Radiant Greninja that Pablo put back into play because he was forced to with the Echoing Horn to thin it out of his hand. So will Pedro... well, no, Pedro can't get to the Boss's Orders this turn because he's playing the Roxanne. So, like, what do you do if you're Pedro here? Because you can't leave that Gardevoir active. Pablo can always just, Psychic Leap the Mew VMAX back into the deck and even take a knockout potentially. Let's see, we're at... Psychic Leap would do 50. We're at 8. Yeah, Psychic Leap would be actually exact knockout. And it looks like we're going for... Oh, yeah, so it looks like he went for the Mewtwo V-Union this turn. And then Pablo just goes, I have boss in hand, I win anyway. So, that is the game. Yeah, as soon as his opponent put the... as soon as his opponent played the Roxanne and built the Mewtwo V-Union, Pablo goes, I have the boss in hand, let's just scoop up and go to the next game. So, Pablo won that almost very convincingly. If Pedro... I would have liked to see Pedro try to use his Curlia's Refinement before playing the Roxanne, just to try to draw into the boss or Serena, because then he could have just won the game. So I think that was a misplay from Pedro there. It would have been a small chance, but that would have... Yeah, that would have won him the game. Yeah, that was not the brightest move, because you could still, even if you whiff it, you can still Roxanne and hope your opponent doesn't have it, and then build a Mewtwo V Union. So, yeah, we do see that was the Mewtwo V Union build. Very interesting to see. I really like it. It's really fun. But it's just asking a lot, especially out of a deck like Gardevoir that's already asking for a lot to get set up. And it does not improve your Lost Backs matchup enough, especially since some of the variations now play that Galarian Moltres. Pablo's prize cards here, not super relevant. He did one of his last 2 prize cards is the Roxanne, so it's entirely possible we never see that out of him this game. Ooh, that is a lot of Mewtwo V Union pieces in this opening hand. Oh, and he prized 2 Ralts and 2 Kirlia. Pedro did not shuffle anywhere near well enough this game, because everything clumped together. Now he's looking through his deck and he's going to know that he has 2 Ralts, 2 Kirlia prized. He does start the Zacian, which is kind of cool. He can attach and Roar the Sword this turn. Pablo can't attack on his first turn. And then we could... I don't know. I don't think Pedro's playing Rare Candy, especially since he's got the Mewtwo V Union build. So I don't think there's any way that the Zacian can attack for a knockout on this next turn. Because if you attach and Roar the Sword and then attach next turn, you're doing 150. So it'll take you 2 turns to power up something that can one-shot a basic V without the use of Gardevoir. Well, it looks like we're going to get 1 Ralts. We are going to attach for turn and then Roar the Sword. Just a pass there. So yeah, pretty bad start for Pedro. Not what you want to see after game 1, where you lost after a pretty long game. You only have 18 minutes left on the clock. You have to win this one in order to even get to a game 3. And now that you've prized so poorly, even if you do end up winning, it's going to take you so long to get set up. So we see double choice belt coming into play. We're going to use the Lost Vacuum just to thin cards out of the hand, and then Judge, trying to get as many outs to maybe a Battle VIP pass as possible for Pablo to be able to get into quite literally anything. Pedro's hand was extremely dead, so you don't like to see judging them here, but I mean, it could be just as dead, just with less cards after the Judge, so not necessarily the worst thing to see Pablo play here. We'll have to see. Looks like a Gardevoir that can't be played. An Ultra Ball. Yeah, that's a pretty bad hand for Pedro then. I can't see the other 2 cards, but we do see Feather Ball that will allow the search for a Mew V. After already benching another Genesect and Mew V as well. So it looks like Pablo is going off to the races. Got a pretty good Judge there. Looks like Pedro is asking the judges for the time because he just pointed to his wrist. That's why I'm always a fan of bringing a watch to a tournament, so you could keep track of time yourself, but half the time I forget at the beginning of the round to look at my watch to see what time the round started at, which is generally a problem. And also, half the time at regionals, I know exactly when the round started, but then the judges don't. Like, they have a completely different time that's like off by 2 minutes, which is super relevant. Like when I'm in the gutters, as I call them, the bottom tables, and I still have the chance to like win out and get points, which is like every freaking regional. It sucks. But I will, my opponent will not show up. So as soon as the, as soon as the organizer or the head judge, whoever it is, says to start, like the clock has started for 50 minutes, I look at my watch, see what exact time it was, and then at exactly 5 minutes, if your opponent's not there, you win game 1. So I call a judge over, and they're like, oh, it's not quite 5 minutes left. And then they come back another 5 minutes later and say, okay, you won game 1. And I have to end up waiting like 15 minutes to win game 2. So I'm just sitting there doing nothing for forever, it feels like. for no reason. Sometimes I'll see the judges walking around and they'll have like a stopwatch going and their stopwatch is like off 3 minutes somehow. I'm like, how? How is that even a thing? It's a little more understandable at this table because they do sometimes start their timer after the other matches have already started. And also the clock that is on stream is hard to keep in sync with the judges at the table. So it is a rough estimate and can be usually off by up to 30 seconds sometimes. But the table judges at the stream always have an accurate timer for this match that's on stream. But looks like we just saw the Storm Slash for 150. And not much is really going on here from Pedro. You'd like to see a little bit more here, but Pablo does play the boss's orders to bring up that Kirlia. We want to make sure that that is out of play so that Pedro does not have any options to get the Gardevoir going. Pablo does not know that Pedro prized 2 1-1 Kirlia lines. But it would be really fun. If I were Pablo and I knew that, I would even more so be going after the Kirlia. I'm like, oh my god, that's hilarious. It's also scary if the Kirlia does become the Gardevoir EX. We could see another situation like the previous game where you never have an out to one-shot it and just get forced to just boss around it a bunch of times. We also see the judge here from Pedro playing the super cool Heart Gold Soul Silver era judge. I love that. That's my favorite version. I really like the new silver border cards, but my favorite of the yellow border cards has to be Heart Gold Soul Silver era. If there's a playable trainer in format, I will buy it in Heart Gold Soul Silver if there's an available version. I used to play with the Call of Legends promo energies, but the hollow ones just warp way too much, and the non-hollow ones are super expensive as well. So I just play with the silver border energies now. They're pretty nice. It used to always be a pet peeve when my opponent would attach an energy to the bottom of their card instead of the top, because the energy symbol would be on the top of the card, but on the new silver bordered ones, it also has the energy symbol on the bottom of the card too, so it's less of a pet peeve now, which is even cooler. And we do see Pablo playing the escape rope, forcing up that Ralts. We've seen 2 Storm Slashes now to just hit Pokemon and not knock them out. We could even see Pablo, if he gets a power tablet, he could Psychic Leap his Mew VMAX that's on the bench back into the deck, healing all that damage off of it basically, while knocking out the Ralts. And Pedro's like pretty screwed in that regard. Oh, there's the power tablet. So it's happening. We already know it. I don't even think there's a point to putting Path to the Peak in play at all. You're just really shutting yourself off because there is no world where a Gardevoir EX comes into play, and Pedro gets a lot more value off of using Storm Slash for 150 than he does, using Storm Slash, than using Roar of the Sword for putting another energy into play to just get one shot on the next turn. So he puts up the other Mew VMAX that's undamaged. So now if Pedro wants to attack again, he's going to have to go through this Mew VMAX. He's just going to do 150 to another Mew VMAX. And Pablo can just potentially loop Psychic Leaps for multiple turns and not really mind it. Looks like his hand is getting big though, so he might have to play Judge just to find an energy card. He did have to shuffle back in his double turbo energy, which is the only thing he's missing right now. And the other Pokemon that Pedro has in play now is the Radiant Greninja. You can leave that. That's perfectly fine. You can just soften up the Zacian V with a Psychic Leap, heal yourself off. and do the same thing again. So you'd like to see another Mew VMAX for the fresh Mew V on the bench, as well as the double turbo energy to the active. Looks like we do get 4 Seal Stone off the last card, along with a power tablet. So we might actually see the knockout of the Zacian instead, because the Greninja can't attack in any world, so... yeah, that's a one-shot on Zacian now. Pedro has, again, been put in check. There is no way that Pedro can get out of this. His next best option is to set up yet another Zacian V. And yeah, I mean, personally, if I were Pedro, I would just scoop and leave. Like, I wouldn't even play it out for the stream. I would be like, yeah, no, that's pretty demoralizing. I'm not gonna let the kids at home watch me flail like that. Flail like a Magikarp. Pablo's at 2 prize cards remaining, and then by the time you get to a Gardevoir, he's already taken those 2 prize cards, so that's the game. Even if it didn't matter on prize cards, like, yeah, he still has 2 more, Pablo has 2 more turns to win, and that's it. We're going to see the Mew is using its ability to get an item card. Looks like we're going to grab the Battle VIP Pass that's completely impossible to play because it's not turn 1. We are also going to Level Ball to get maybe Curlia for next turn because we know there's no more Ralts left in the deck. We've been recycling the exact same Ralts multiple times with Clara and Rescue Carrier. Finally sees a research to actually like get a decent hand, but again, because of those prizes, there's just like nothing you can do. And yeah, again, flailing like a Magikarp is the best way I can describe this match right now. I feel really bad for Pedro. He's trying his best, but there's quite literally nothing he can do. I mean, he could set up a Mewtwo V Union and use its first attack to use its first attack to load itself up with energy and then continue to heal itself every turn. But if Pablo can just get another boss's orders, he like basically wins the game anyway. So he just scoops at that point because Pablo goes Echoing Horn on the Zacian, and he's gonna go and knock it out with the boss's orders and the power tablet. So yeah, that was a game, very clean game. 2-0 for Pablo. And that is why it's favored into Gardevoir. So I hope everybody enjoyed. Do not forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Again, it is all really important, and we will see you guys in the next round.